Hello, Professor McDonald. I hope this finds you well and recovering nicely. To show you how much I've learned, I've applied the hero's journey, among other themes we discussed this semester, to one of my all-time favorite movies, Nacho Libre. I've seen this movie dozens of times, but I recently had a revelation and discovered that the story largely corresponds to the plot arc of a medieval hero tale. We have a hero, a helper, and even a healing female. It is remarkable to me that a story this bizarre, off-color, and irreverent might have something in common with the 800-year-old text that we've read this semester. Let's begin. This is Ignacio, our protagonist and eventual hero. He lives at a monastery in rural Mexico, where he cooks for the orphans and performs other priestly duties assigned to him by the Brotherhood of Monks. He desperately wants to be a man of God, yet chafes at the arrogance of the monks and aspires to greater things. Crucially, he loves wrestling, even though it is forbidden for a man of God. Finally, he is smitten with Sister Encarnacion, a nun, another contradiction with his role at the monastery. Something's gotta give. Stage 1. The Call to Adventure. One day, Ignacio rides into town to pick up donated chips for the orphans. However, he is ambushed by a street urchin named Steven. Humiliated, Ignacio begins to ride his motorcycle home when he sees a crowd in the street showering adoration on a pro wrestler, or luchador. Then the camera zooms in on a poster that reads, Tournament for New Wrestlers. This is the call to adventure. The viewer can clearly see that the idea has been planted in Ignacio's mind. When he returns to the orphanage, he is humiliated by the monks who complain about the lack of chips, the Lord's chips. Ignacio storms off, declaring that he will have his glory day in the hot sun. Before he truly embarks on the adventure, an illicit wrestling career, he needs a tag team partner.
Listen to me! Hey! Won't you take it easy? I need your help! And take out the legs! Listen to me! Today, I have the chance of a lifetime. But first, I need a man. Get off me!
In this way, Stephen functions as both the threshold guardian and the helper. He must be convinced to cooperate before Ignacio can embark on the adventure, and thus guards the threshold. Once he has agreed to join forces with Nacho, he becomes the indispensable helper, and the threshold is crossed. Now that Ignacio is his teammate, he is prepared to face the trials of his adventure. He adopts the name Nacho, and Stephen becomes Esquelito. Predictably, they are easily beat in their first match. However, any dejection from losing is erased by an envelope full of pesos from the promoter. With his earnings, Ignacio triumphantly serves the brothers and orphans colorful salads, blowing everyone's minds, including Encarnacion. It seems for the moment that he's victorious, but like the other heroes we've encountered, Eric comes to mind. The initial victory is only the beginning. As Ignacio continues to fight and make money, he grows tempted by the new things that are available to him.
Say hello to the BravaJet mopping robot from iRobot. Its precision jet spray and vibrating cleaning head loosen and scrub stains, all while navigating kitchens, bathrooms, and those hard-to-reach places. You and BravaJet from iRobot. Better together.
Something is the best for me. Yes, I have made a very pressing progress. Yes, like speeding with those devices. Like driving Coca-Cola, paying toilet jumbo jets for the something is the best for me. Bubblegum, 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 bubblegum for me.
Material goods are one temptation. The next is Encarnacion. Ignacio and Stephen conspire to set up a fake street fight so that Ignacio can demonstrate how strong he is to her, while also ditching his robe for this more appealing getup. It backfires spectacularly. Frustrated with his failure to woo Encarnacion, Ignacio becomes preoccupied with his lack of fighting prowess, leading to another temptation, seeking supernatural help.
In order for you to become empowered by the eagle, That's what you're saying.
Of course, the eggs provide no such benefit, and the next fight goes just as poorly for Nacho and Esqueleto. Still determined to break into the top ranks of pro wrestling, Nacho and Esqueleto resolve to crash the party of Senor Ramon, the top wrestling promoter in town. Immediately rejected, they both sneak into the party, which devolves into another disaster.
Ramsey's number one, he knows the secrets of desire. Ramses is the one, he puts the people all on fire. Ramses.
Dejected, Ignacio walks home and finds Encarnacion cooking breakfast, which is his job. He admits partially to his involvement in pro wrestling, to which Encarnacion replies, "You need forgiveness." That Ignacio asks her if it is always wrong to fight. To this she replies, "If you fight for something noble or someone who needs your help, then only then will God bless you in battle." Unwittingly, Encarnacion has provided Ignacio with the inspiration for his eventual victory and redemption. With all the orphans and monks assembled in church, Ignacio lights a candle and asks God why he desires to wrestle, even though he knows it is wrong. He thinks about what Encarnacion has said, and then has a revelation. He will fight again and donate everything he wins to the orphans. If he wins, he knows God is with him. Unfortunately for Ignacio, he then catches on fire. With his rope burned away, his wrestling uniform is on display for all to see. He vows in front of the assembled witnesses, orphans, monks, and Encarnacion, to win tonight and prove that God approves of his wrestling. Crushingly, he comes up just short in the battle royale. Oh, this is him in his wrestling uniform for all to see. Unfortunately, he comes up just short in the battle royale, losing to a behemoth called Silencio. Convinced that he's a failure in the eyes of God and man, Ignacio returns to the monastery, packs his things, and goes to the wilderness, in his own words, probably to die. This is the proverbial abyss, or death, for our hero Ignacio.
Mary Poppins, have you ever ridden a bicycle like this before? Really?
This Christmas, you can take a ride.
Ready, everyone?
On the most magical adventure of the holiday season.
You'd think they'd never done this before.
Mary Poppins Returns. Rated PG, December 19th.
However, all is not lost.
How did you find me here?
I saw you from the village.
Hola, Nacho!
Bueno,
I have some news. Silencio isn't going to be able to fight Ramses. He got injured. Ruski's bonios. They are swollen really hard.
Thanks to his helper, he emerges reborn with a new sense of purpose. He can fight again. It is time for his final atonement and transformation. Ignacio's opponent is Ramses, the undisputed local champion, and a monstrous figure who communicates mostly in grunts. He hates Nacho, and he seems intent on doing as much damage to him as possible. And indeed, through the first half of the fight, he dominates Nacho, as everyone expects. But suddenly, as Ramses has him pinned to the ground, Encarnacion and the orphans enter the arena, and Ignacio is transformed. With his purpose finally aligned, he vanquishes Ramses and fulfills the atonement part of the journey. Taking a step back, this is what happened in the story. Ignacio starts off torn by contradictions. Although not a monk, he wants to be a holy man. The theme song of the movie even has a refrain about being a real religious man. Having grown up at the orphanage, Nacho thinks the only way to be a real religious man is to emulate the strict lifestyle of the monks. No women, no wrestling, no fancy clothes, great creams or lotions, in his own words. Yet he also desires all of those things. For a time, he manages to live a dual life, but then his lies become exposed. He casts himself away as a failure in the eyes of both God and man. There's no going back to his life at the orphanage. However, when he returns to battle Ramses and sees Encarnacion and the children, his two worlds collide. In the moment that he realizes that they still care about him and need his help, he reconciles his contradictions. For if he wins, he can serve God through the worldly activity of wrestling, and therefore doesn't need to become a monk he doesn't need to be a monk to become a real religious man. He defeats Ramses and becomes complete. The movie ends with Ignacio, Stephen, Encarnacion, and the orphans happily enjoying a field trip.